Hello there, I'm the Serial Plagiarist, and today we're going to go over Belated Media's famous but terrible rewrite of the prequel trilogy. Created in the age of peak prequel hate, the rewrite has now aged badly, as the dude behind the rewrite both doesn't understand the original or prequel trilogy, and some of his changes are as insane as it is stupid. Among his changes include a lot of weird things, and it's a demonstration on how grossly unqualified he is as a writer himself. Now, I'm guilty of dumb but fun rewrites myself, but having matured since then, I can say that a bunch of Belated Media's ideas are extremely misguided. So without further ado, let's begin.
What if episode 1 was good? Like, really good?
Then it wouldn't be the masterpiece we know and love today.
What if I were a story exec at Fox and George Lucas came to me and was like, this is the film I'm directing, and I was like, no, let's go through this right now and let's see all the points that work and don't work, and I'm going to rework it right now with you.
That's quite the high bar. That you would be talented enough to be a Fox executive, that you would openly question George on his creative decisions pre-1999, and also that you could have saved the movie, quote-unquote.
So here, bearing in mind what George Lucas presented to all of us, we're going to get my version of episode 1. So here we go with What If.
I'm sweating.
Now, the big thing whenever making a sequel or prequel, whenever you're revisiting a franchise, things need to feel old and new at the same time. Now, George made the misstep of thinking that familiarity meant characters. However, the same can be accomplished through theming and parallels.
Okay, what does that mean? Like, seriously, he doesn't elaborate on what he means by George mistakenly thinking that making things old and new meant through characters? Like, what? I wouldn't describe the Phantom Menace as a character-driven story exactly. And he doesn't explain anything. I think in the age of peak prequel hate, this guy expects the uninitiated to already know what he's talking about. But the thing is, no we don't. This is literally the one and only time I've heard anyone say anything like this. And never again. And since he doesn't explain anything and go into detail, I don't know how to respond to this other than, what the hell are you talking about? Him rushing through the story is actually a common theme in this trilogy rewrite.
It also helps to have a main character. Episode 1 was very muddled in that regard. You aren't really sure who to point to.
Even I figured out who the main character was by the time I turned 13. And I had no idea what Plinkett was trying to say in his review. I also don't understand why the central protagonist thing is such a detriment to the story, since Qui-Gon, Obi-Wan, Queen Amidala, Anakin, and Jar Jar, among others, play a central part in the story and are the characters you follow. So there is a group we follow regardless for the entire story. Something that was also pointed out to me that gave me Red Dead Redemption vibes is that the protagonist role switches from Qui-Gon to Obi-Wan in this very shot, as we switch POVs during Duel of the Fates. If you're seeing Star Wars for the first time, this is basically a subtle hint that Qui-Gon is about to be slain, and Anakin's fate will be changed forever. Cool detail, wouldn't you say?
And it is really apparent who it should be. It's Obi-Wan's story.
Obi-Wan? Obi-Wan is a central character in the prequel trilogy, but it's not his story. It's Anakin's. In fact, the whole way the prequel trilogy connects to the originals is that George made Anakin Skywalker and Darth Vader the central overarching character. Now, say what you will about this not being the case when the originals were the only movies that existed, but it's not a bad change whatsoever. And actually a necessary change of perspective when you're making a prequel trilogy. Luke is just demoted from main protagonist to central character, and that's only one step down, really.
Much as the way as the original trilogies were all about Luke. However, the overarching story will be about Darth Vader.
So you understand that the overarching story is about Darth Vader, but also think that Obi-Wan should be the main character for the prequel trilogy? Yeah, I think I prefer George's version where Anakin was the main character. It makes for a better overarching story, because as the overarching character, the fall of Anakin is focused on entirely, and most importantly, directly, rather than seeing someone else witness his fall.
With that in mind, we open in similar fashion with Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon Jinn going to Naboo. However, they aren't stopping directly at the Trade Federation because right now it's peacetime.
So are you just saying that they're here for a checkup and the Trade Federation isn't here yet? That's sure to bore prequel haters even more than when they were told there was a blockade and no one could get in and out of Naboo. Seriously.
Obi-Wan is wistfully looking off into space and reminiscing about the days of yore where they were brave Jedi Knights, fighting the ultimate evil, the Sith. Whereas now they're going from routine checkups from planet to planet, kind of like galactic sheriffs. And Qui-Gon, who's still his master, is like, dude, just be happy that the Sith aren't here anymore. Those were very dark times.
I also really disliked the lack of focus on Qui-Gon Jinn in this rewrite. Prequel haters are still going to complain that Yoda was Obi-Wan's master in this rewrite, and Belated Media doesn't really understand the significance of Qui-Gon Jinn. As the protagonist of the Phantom Menace, he brought everyone together, and the funeral at the end represents that. And the fact that he was burning was foreshadowing for Anakin's own fate, where he was looking into his forever altered future, both metaphorically and literally.
In this moment, we get to see that Obi-Wan is naive, like Luke was at the start of his journey. But we don't have much time to think about it because what's this? The Trade Federation?
So did the Trade Federation just show up out of nowhere? Did Belated Media forget that the blockade being the instigator had both Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan trapped after their own ship was blasted into smithereens? So they were forced to get an alternate way down to the surface? He really doesn't go into detail about his plot, and I think when you're doing a prequel rewrite, you need more than 12 minutes to describe the story and the symbolism and themes of your version.
They see that the ships are all going to the palace and they divert course, so they land and they find out from some native Gungans, but not Jar Jar because it's not important.
Excuse me, what? Jar Jar had loads of relevance. He is pretty much the part that unites the humans and the Gungans together against a common enemy. And people vastly underestimate how pivotal Jar Jar was in all this. Now, the quality of the character is another issue entirely, but just know that you're wrong in regards to relevance.
This invasion has been taking place over the past few weeks.
Wait, the invasion has been taking place for weeks? How would Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan not know about this?
Obi-Wan gets excited at the chance of action, while Qui-Gon is alarmed that the Galactic Senate and the Jedi Council knew nothing about this.
And how would the Senate and the Jedi know nothing about the invasion again?
What was once a routine checkup is now a rescue mission for the Queen. So this rescue and subsequent escape is now our first real burst of action. And since we've spent more time getting to know our characters, we're going to be more invested in this action, as opposed to meeting two strangers who then immediately take out their lightsaber.
You have not watched this movie properly, I can say that much.
And from the escape, the same beats can play out as we land on Tatooine. So they need parts and they need to go down and get the pieces.
Why the hell are you skipping over everything? If Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan didn't encounter a blockade but managed to escape, then why the hell does the escape ship need to repair itself? Why do they need to stop at Tatooine?
Now this is where we start to deviate a little more, because in the released film, Obi-Wan stays on the ship while Qui-Gon and Padme go out into the desert.
Yeah, because someone needs to protect the Queen. There's a reason for all of this, you know.
But Obi-Wan is our main character, so Obi-Wan, Qui-Gon, and Padme now all go. Just like the actual film, Qui-Gon can voice some concern about taking a handmaiden out into Tatooine, and Padme can respond that she can take care of herself just fine, and maybe Qui-Gon should be more concerned about his servant taking care of himself, referring to Obi-Wan. And we get a fun back and forth bit of verbal sparring as they walk out into the desert, and that bickering would remind us of...
Oh yeah, that's right. Belated Media openly thinks that Obi-Wan and Padme should be in a suggestive romance, which is one of the worst changes you could think of. Out of context, that's just predatory. And in context, where both characters are similar ages in this version, but this guy just forgot to mention that, it's still stupid because it's just a cliche love triangle. A love triangle that doesn't go anywhere, because in the future 2 movies, it has minimal impact on the 2 sequels after The Phantom Menace.
That's one of the big things that the film was lacking, a sense of playfulness among characters, rather than just giving poop jokes to Jar Jar.
Yeah, I disagree. On Tatooine especially, the characters do actually play off of each other, but it's more subtle and they don't scream it in your face with constant quipping. For example, we have this scene.
Are you sure about this? Trusting our fate to a boy we hardly know? The Queen will not approve.
The Queen doesn't need to know.
Well, I don't approve.
And then they get to Anakin. And again, more tweaks are gonna happen. He's not a boy, he's a teen or young adult.
Yeah, and he doesn't explain where this change comes from, so I'm just gonna guess that he doesn't want to see Kid Vader, which is an extremely stupid criticism of the prequel trilogy. And a lack of understanding of what George was doing because they just shut it down because they want Darth Vader to be this mysterious, all-powerful warlord. And a kid detracts from that skewed image they have.
And he's not a mechanical genius, so he definitely hasn't built C-3PO.
Yeah, make Anakin older, but then you just make that change pointless by not having him be gifted either way. I also don't think he understands the symbolism of C-3PO being created by the same guy who becomes a ruthless enforcer. Also, did you know that George Lucas always intended for 3PO to be built by a kid specifically? I think that actually makes a lot more sense story-wise, because C-3PO is a passive, friendly machine bordering on being human-like, while Vader is cold and ruthless, bordering on being more machine than man. You know what I'm saying? Also, if you watch the films in chronological order, the progress of the characters splitting off makes total sense.
It's great that you want to give people fan service, George, but these characters can show up later. Obi-Wan and Tatooine are familiar faces enough for episode 1. However, it is wonderful that you're showing us a different side of Tatooine. The pod racing is kind of cool, and the whole idea that there's like a scrap junkyard and that, you know, whatever. That's fun.
The unenthusiasm really shows. Is this guy even a Star Wars fan of any kind, or is he just some guy trying to profit off of prequel hate of the time?
Again, old and new. On a side note, the whole idea of Toydarians being the trump card to Jedi is kind of weird, because you did kind of create Superman in that. So to create a creature that can be like, no, I don't fall for that, does work, but it also is like, why didn't the Empire just like, you know, get a bunch of Toydarians to always deal as stormtroopers, because then Jedi would never be able to... Anyway.
This complaint is just so nitpicky. Obviously, humans are more common in the galaxy than Toydarians, and Jedi are at their lowest number by the events of A New Hope. So that's just a worthless complaint.
So Qui-Gon Jinn meets Anakin and is like, holy shit, the Force is strong with this one. And Obi-Wan is like, wait, what are you talking about? And Qui-Gon Jinn is like, no, the Force, it's really strong, because he can just feel it since midi-chlorians aren't a thing, you know?
So how can he feel Anakin's Force sensitivity then? What's the means of measuring the Force then?
And Qui-Gon's like, oh man, I have to train him. And Obi-Wan's like, dude, I'm right here. So an upset Obi-Wan wanders the streets of Tatooine and maybe stops at a bar. You know, if George wants to reference himself.
George ain't referencing himself though, you're referencing him.
And being in a not-so-pleasant mood, he gets himself into a skirmish with a pod racer. Padme shows up and they manage to make it out alive, and we see a mutual respect developing between the two. And the hints of a blossoming romance. So they return to the pod race training, but oh my god, wouldn't you know it, Wadu's pod racer manages to get himself injured, and Qui-Gon is like, oh, I can test my hunch now. Oh hey, why don't you have Anakin race? And everyone's like, and Anakin's like, I've never done that before. We're dealing with a more sheepish Anakin. He's a slave, so he wouldn't have a ton of confidence.
And this is why making Anakin older in this version is a completely pointless change. I noticed that most rewrites have Anakin be a slave still, but just older. And it's like, why? Then you realize it's because they just don't want to see Vader as a kid, and it's completely petty as all hell.
But Qui-Gon tells Anakin as long as he uses the Force, all will be well. From there, the same bet goes down. We get to see Anakin's confidence grow when he wins. Qui-Gon's hunch is proven, and yeah, Anakin's free and gets to be a Jedi.
Wait, is that it? So in your version, Anakin's never pod raced before, unlike his canonical counterpart, but he still wins? That is not plausible or believable whatsoever. And the fact you don't explain it in detail, I'm left thinking that you just like the pod racing sequence, like we all did, but couldn't figure out how to make it fit in your version with different context. So you gave up and said, oh well, fuck it.
So we got the parts and we're going back and oh shit, Darth Maul! And they have that brief encounter and they're like, wait, what, Sith?
So far this rewrite really just gives the impression that George didn't screw up that much, honestly. He just made a handful of mistakes, but the film persevered regardless.
So they get on the ship, they fly up, they go to Coruscant, and Queen Amidala / Padme is in the Senate and she's like, look, the Trade Federation is really fucking shit up in Naboo. And everyone's like, what are you talking about? Bureaucracy's amazing. She's like, I'm just gonna have to do this shit myself.
I love how you just summarize this part without a real explanation of what's actually going on and why. It sounds like even you don't know what's going on in your own version.
Meanwhile, Mace Windu is chastising Qui-Gon Jinn about taking on Anakin because Anakin is too old. That, you know, completely flies.
But why does it fly? Can you explain it? I thought most prequel haters called bullshit on that because they thought that anyone could become a Jedi at any age. Even though Yoda hints towards it in The Empire Strikes Back, you know?
And again, when we meet the Jedi Council, we don't meet Yoda. We just hear about how awesome he is, because that's a good reveal to the character of just hearing Master Yoda, really great, Master Yoda. And we all know Master Yoda's really great because we've seen episode 5.
Yeah, I also think that Belated Media doesn't understand that restricting character presence in a prequel trilogy is just going to make the overarching story worse. And besides, everybody already knows that Vader is Luke's father and what Yoda looks like. It's not exclusive to people who have seen the movies.
And Mace Windu raises the point of like, what about Obi-Wan Kenobi? He hasn't fully learned. And Qui-Gon says, well, when I was teaching Obi-Wan as a Padawan, I learned a ton from him. And Obi-Wan will learn from whoever he teaches.
Oh great, the I learned a lot more from you than you ever learned from me cliche.
Meanwhile, right outside the doors, Anakin and Obi-Wan are sitting waiting for Qui-Gon to get out. While they're sitting out there, Palpatine steps out. Now, Palpatine is no longer a senator, but is the intermediary between the senators and the Jedi Council. So he actually has more strings to pull because he's the one who sent them to Naboo to get Queen Amidala and everything.
OG Palpatine manipulated all this anyways, so I don't understand the point of giving him less overarching power.
This also allows him to be friendly with all the Jedi, so he shows up and is like, hey, where's Master Yoda? And Obi-Wan's like, oh, you know, he's off doing amazing things, because Yoda's amazing.
I swear this guy just holds Yoda on such a pedestal to the point that he's not even gonna bother building Yoda up as a character. He doesn't even stick with this going into the Attack of the Clones rewrite, because he must have realized his mistake.
And this is Anakin, and Anakin's like, hi! And Palpatine's like, you don't seem to like Anakin very much, and Obi-Wan confides in Palpatine. He's like, well, I'm a little jealous. And Palpatine's like, be careful, jealousy can lead you to the dark side. Hint, hint.
What, in front of Anakin? Where is this bullshit even going?
And before we can even realize what's going on, they're on their way back to Naboo.
Gee, screw context, let's just go back to Naboo.
So they all go down and they can meet the Gungans if they want, and at that point Padme can reveal, oh shit, I'm Amidala, and they're like, what? That's crazy, and that really, works, because...
But how would they meet the Gungans without Jar Jar? You're forgetting how pivotal of a role he played in uniting everyone.
The Queen wandering around Tatooine, there would be less reason for her to be talking to Obi-Wan, so we'll hold on to that, and she'll have her big reveal, and George Lucas will be very happy because he loves his reveals.
Don't know if he'd be happy with your other changes, though.
And the Gungans offer to give them their ships to travel and surprise Viceroy, blah, blah, blah. So the big thing is, we aren't having 4 different battles going on when they need to get to one point, the Viceroy, and reclaim Naboo.
What was wrong with Return of the Jedi having 4 battles then?
The Jedi, Padme, the Gungans, they're all going to take on one person.
I don't see what the problem is with splitting them up where they all do something important that contributes to reclaiming Naboo. But here's the thing, thinking that going straight for the Viceroy only is a dumb strategy. Think about space where the ships are being controlled, and the Gungans diverting attention. It's actually all important.
It's streamlined and simplified. And I know a lot of you are like, but wait, where's Anakin? Well, Anakin's back at the Jedi Council where he should be, because why the fuck would you take a kid when, they established that the Jedis have a training center.
I thought he wasn't a kid in your version though.
So just like Georgie wanted, they're all going straight to the Viceroy, and oh shit, Darth Maul's back again. But instead of getting separated and going off into Lightbridge generator room or whatever that the Jedi and Sith wind up in, they're going to stay pretty close to the action. In fact, Padme and her dealing with the droid, and the Sith and the Jedi battles are going to be, both kind of headed towards the same place where the Viceroy is.
Okay, and why the change?
And right before they run off to take on Darth Maul, Padme gives a little take care to Obi-Wan, and Obi-Wan now is like, oh shit, you are interested in me, that's cool, and runs off with the power of love fueling him to take on Darth Maul. We get our cool lightsaber battles, we get our cool blasters, we don't need any space battle again, because who would we even care about going up and dealing with that? They somehow got onto Naboo anyway, so the blockade wasn't doing anything.
How about Anakin and R2, who you decided not to include in this rewrite because you missed the point of the climax?
So the Gungans and Amidala are facing off on droids, and they're like, blast, 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 and they get to the Viceroy, and they're about to be like, Viceroy, you're finished. And at that exact moment, Darth Maul, Qui-Gon, and Obi-Wan stumble into the room, and everyone's like, what? And the Viceroy's like, blam, and Padme's like, ah! And Obi-Wan's like, oh shit, I'm gonna go run take care of that.
Jesus, what a mess of a rewrite.
Away from Qui-Gon and Darth Maul to Padme, who he cares about.
Oh yeah, the stupid out-of-place romance. Of course.
Of course, in that exact moment, he's now directly responsible for when Darth Maul's like, slice, and Obi-Wan's like, wait, what? Fuck.
So in this version, Obi-Wan split off from Qui-Gon and Qui-Gon's dead because of that? This guy basically rips off the Clone Wars Season 5 moving forward, so you can tell he took numerous cues from that show. the show I despise with a burning passion.
So everybody starts blasting at Maul and Maul runs away.
So Maul chickened out and didn't complete his mission?
Obi-Wan runs over to Qui-Gon and is like, hey, Master, fuck. And Qui-Gon's like, yeah, dude, fuck. Please just promise me you'll take care of Anakin. And Obi-Wan's like, well, you'll grow and learn to be friends with one another. Oh, and if I ever see Darth Maul, yeah, I'll really kill the fuck out of him. Great. And Qui-Gon dies.
What a fucking joke of a death scene. I know this guy is paraphrasing, but good lord, I can't even stomach how this guy would reimagine the dialogue from the final film.
Now, to me, the way that Darth Maul was handled in Episode 1 is the greatest mistake of the prequel trilogies. Honestly, if there was only one thing that I could change, it would be that Darth Maul would not die.
If there's one thing I'd counteract about your rewrite, it would be the Obi-Wan and Padme romance. And then after that, probably Darth Maul. I don't know. I thought Darth Maul always worked as a short but sweet silent character who makes his presence and impact all before he's killed. I mean, he changed the course of the saga forever by killing Qui-Gon Jinn, and so many people underestimate how much that changed the story in its tracks.
Obi-Wan needs a motivator, and Darth Maul is an embodiment of evil. For Maul to best Obi-Wan and then kill his master, there's plenty of room for growth there.
Yeah, no thanks. I saw the Clone Wars and George backtracked hard.
And the next time they meet, it's going to be epic.
It's sad how you couldn't even come up with a convincing reason to have Darth Maul flee before he was done with Obi-Wan.
In the film we got, all that Obi-Wan had to do in the subsequent 2 films was basically play Clue for the Jedi Council.
Yeah, like the mystery in that film wasn't effective or interesting. Jeez.
It's not a personal affair. But if he's trying to find Maul, oh, you can bet he's gonna put his heart and soul into it.
You don't think that his conflict with training Anakin wasn't good enough? Well, actually, no. He complains about that in the next video, but I think he really should have explained it here too.
And even if we did allow for him to get cut in half in Episode 1, in the Star Wars universe, we can have robotics replace things, and he sliced him perfectly in half, so his entire lower half is robotics.
Jeez, you're really thinking like George Backtrack Lucas here.
That's the perfect opportunity for Obi-Wan to be haunted by this nightmare. He'd show up again and Obi-Wan wouldn't know what to think. In this instance, Maul would be stronger, and he'd have some serious beef against Obi-Wan.
But how did he survive exactly? That slice in half signified death.
And oh, look at that! There's some crazy foreshadowing of Anakin's fate, because he's like half robot, half man. Oh, funny that.
Yeah, this was kind of already in the films, with the addition of Dooku and Grievous symbolizing Anakin's future transformation.
And it just makes sense to have a long-term villain that's known to the protagonist.
I would like to know why the overarching antagonist being hidden away detracts from the storytelling.
Luke sees Vader kill Obi-Wan Kenobi, and then they finally meet in Empire. The stakes are super high. And every time they meet, the relationship just gets more and more complex.
I don't see how having Maul retreat or get cut in half but survive would be anything else but contrived.
But God, yeah, this one really bugs me. Let's get back to the story. So meanwhile, back in Coruscant, Darth Maul's like, yo, Sidious, really sorry I didn't, hold Naboo. And Darth Sidious is like, it's okay.
Tell me you're joking. Darth Sidious would not tolerate failure like that.
Darth Maul's like, what? And Darth Sidious is like, hey, it's okay, you killed Qui-Gon Jinn, now Obi-Wan's full of rage, and, he's gonna go after you and kill you, and then he'll be my apprentice, because, I was sensing a really strong thing when I ran into him at the chamber.
Of course, Darth Maul would attempt to overthrow his master if he even hinted at replacing him, at least in this context.
But what he doesn't know is that it's actually Anakin that he was sensing.
So Palps couldn't tell the difference when 2 people are in the room? Bullshit.
So Darth Maul is like, wait, so you're going to pit everybody? And Darth Sidious is like, that's why I'm the Emperor. I pull fucking strings all the time. And so we're like, oh shit, this is kinda dark. Obi-Wan's gonna turn.
Yeah, this is a terrible setup for the next movie. I can't even tell what the proper context is for all this sarcasm. It's that cluttered and confusing.
And before we can even really think about it, we're back to Naboo where they're all celebrating because they think everything's hunky-dory because they've freed the place. And just looking back, from the start of the film, so much has happened to Obi-Wan and he's grown so much.
Yeah, he's been a snarky dork to a flat-out pedophile. In relation to Padme, thanks.
He's no longer the Padawan. He's been pushed from the nest and has to learn to fly. And we're excited to see where he goes, as the world is becoming more complex, as are the relationships around him. We're excited for the next movie. But that's just a what if.
Your what if sucks. And that just about does it for this video. His rewrite had baffling changes, made no sense, he overgeneralizes, and the rewrite is kinda similar to the final film anyways, just dumber. That's my video on Belated Media. Tune in for Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith, because that's when he really starts to get off track. I'm JJ Plagiarisms, and until next time, what are stories but mystery boxes?
Under the mountain, a golden fountain, where you